What if the quiet neighbor next door, the one you wave to every morning, is hiding a secret so dark it could unravel the fabric of your small town? In the shadows of ordinary life, where picket fences and polished cars paint a picture of normalcy, something sinister festers, waiting to be uncovered. These 8 true horror stories, drawn from the edges of reality, will grip your soul and make you question the safety of the world around you. From vanishing families to masked figures in abandoned houses, each tale is a descent into the unknown, where the truth is more terrifying than fiction. Dare to read on, but beware. Once you step into these stories, there's no turning back. In the sleepy town where I grew up, secrets were as common as the creaking floorboards in our old houses, but none were as chilling as the mystery of Mr. Collins and his missing family. Our street was a quiet stretch of aging homes, their paint peeling under the weight of time, framed by towering trees that whispered secrets in the evening breeze. My family lived in a modest house with a white picket fence, the kind you'd see in a postcard, but next door stood the Collins home, a modern, pristine anomaly that seemed to gleam unnaturally against the backdrop of our weathered neighborhood. Mr. Collins, a wealthy man with a sharp jaw and sharper silence, was an enigma. He rarely spoke, his eyes always darting as if guarding a secret, but his obsession with his sleek black sports car was impossible to ignore. Every weekend, like clockwork, he'd be out there, polishing it to a mirror finish, his hands moving with a reverence that felt almost ritualistic. I'd watch from my bedroom window, a 10-year-old kid with too much curiosity, wondering why a man would treat a car like it was his entire world. His wife, Mrs. Collins, was his opposite, warm, with a smile that could melt the coldest day, always ready with a plate of homemade cookies or a kind word about my schoolwork. Their 2-year-old daughter Stacy was a bundle of joy, her giggles echoing through their manicured yard as she toddled after her mother. They were the perfect family, or so it seemed, until the day they vanished. It was a crisp autumn morning when the whispers started. Mrs. Collins and Stacy were gone, and Mr. Collins claimed his wife had left him, taking their daughter with her. The police came, their questions sharp but fruitless, and our small town buzzed with theories. Some said she'd run off with a lover, others hinted at something far worse. My parents, shocked like everyone else, could only shake their heads and say they hadn't seen anything strange. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Weeks turned into months, and the rumors grew wilder, each one clawing at the edges of my mind. Mr. Collins, once a ghost of a man, became even more withdrawn, but his car, that gleaming, perfect car, remained his obsession. I'd catch him polishing it late at night, his movements frantic, as if he could scrub away whatever haunted him. Then came the day my dad saw something that changed everything. He was tinkering in our garage when he noticed Mr. Collins' garage door ajar, revealing Mrs. Collins' white Jeep, covered in a thick layer of dust, untouched for months. My dad called me and Mom over, and we stood there, staring, our breaths shallow. If Mrs. Collins had left, why was her car still here? The question hung heavy, unspoken, as we exchanged uneasy glances. A few days later, the Jeep was gone, sold, we assumed, though Mr. Collins never said a word. His behavior grew stranger. He stopped tending his yard, letting the grass grow wild, and the once spotless car began to collect dirt, as if his obsession had faltered under an unseen weight. He'd pace his porch, glancing over his shoulder like a hunted animal, his eyes hollow with something I couldn't name. Then came the night that still haunts my dreams. We were eating dinner, the clink of forks against plates the only sound, when a deafening crash echoed from next door. My dad grabbed a flashlight, his face tight with worry, and told us to stay put. From the window, I watched him cross the yard, his shadow stretching long and thin under the moonlight. He knocked on Mr. Collins' door, and after what felt like an eternity, Mr. Collins answered, his face pale as death, his hands trembling. Dad asked if everything was okay, and Mr. Collins mumbled something about dropping a pan, but when Dad returned, his eyes were wide with unease. He told us in a low voice that he'd seen something inside, a pot of dark, simmering liquid on the stove, and next to it, a handgun on the counter, glinting in the dim light. The image burned into my mind, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. After that night, Mr. Collins became a ghost in his own home, rarely seen, his presence a shadow that darkened our street. The town's whispers grew into accusations. People said he'd done something unthinkable to his wife and daughter, but with no evidence, it was all speculation. I started having nightmares, visions of Mrs. Collins and Stacy trapped behind those closed doors, their faces pleading for help. The thought that something horrific had happened just feet from my bedroom was paralyzing. Years later, I moved away, desperate to escape the memories, but they followed me. I'd lie awake at night, picturing that dusty Jeep, Mr. Collins' haunted eyes, and the gun on the counter. I'd wonder where Mrs. Collins and Stacy were, if they were safe, or if they'd ever escaped the man who loved his car more than his family. The town never found answers, and neither did I, but the fear lingers, a cold, unshakable dread that surfaces in the quiet moments, reminding me of the darkness that can hide behind a perfect facade. I pray Mrs. Collins and Stacy are out there, safe, far from the man who polished his car like it held the key to his soul. But deep down, I fear the truth is far worse. It was supposed to be just another late-night delivery, one of the hundreds I'd done before, but something about this order felt wrong from the start. I'd been delivering food for months, driving through every corner of the city, thinking I knew every street like the back of my hand. But that night, my GPS took me to a part of town I'd never seen, a creepy neighborhood where the houses were far apart and the roads twisted like a maze. It was past midnight, the air hot and sticky, and the streetlights were so dim they barely lit anything, casting long, eerie shadows across the pavement. As I followed the GPS, the streets got narrower, the turns sharper, and I started feeling like I was going in circles. My phone's map kept glitching, the arrow spinning wildly, until it finally said I'd arrived. I stopped the car and looked out the window at a tall, run-down house at the end of a dead-end street. Its paint was peeling, windows broken or boarded up, and the lawn was a jungle of overgrown grass. The place looked abandoned, like it hadn't been lived in for years, and a chill ran through me despite the heat. I grabbed the food bag, the warmth of the takeout containers doing little to calm my nerves. I told myself it was just an old house, someone probably lived there, but the silence was heavy. No crickets, no cars in the distance, just the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. I got out of the car, gravel crunching under my shoes, and walked toward the porch. The front door was slightly open, a thin black gap showing nothing but darkness inside. I knocked, the sound echoing like the house was empty, and called out, my voice shaky despite trying to sound confident. No one answered. I knocked again, harder, but only the door's creak responded as it opened a bit more, revealing a dark hallway that seemed to swallow the light. My heart pounded, every instinct screaming to leave, drop the food, and get back to the safety of my car, but I stayed. Maybe the customer was late, or out back. I stepped forward, peering into the darkness, when I heard a noise, a soft rustling, like something moving through bushes. I turned, my breath catching in my throat, and that's when I saw them. Figures stepped out from the shadows, emerging from behind trees and around the house's corners, moving slowly, almost gliding. My blood ran cold as they got closer, their faces hidden behind blank, white masks, smooth, featureless, like porcelain dolls with no eyes or mouths. There were 4 or 5 of them, dressed in dark clothes that blended into the night. I stumbled back, the food bag slipping from my hands, my mind racing for an escape, but they'd surrounded me like a pack of wolves. One reached out, their fingers ice cold against my arm, making my skin crawl. I tried to run, but another grabbed me from behind, their grip unnaturally strong, pulling me toward the house. I thrashed, kicking, but it was like fighting shadows. They didn't speak, didn't make a sound, their silence more terrifying than any threat. My heart hammered as they dragged me through the door, the darkness swallowing me whole. Inside, the air smelled of rot, the walls damp and crumbling, the floor littered with dirt and broken debris. I could barely see, just a faint glow from the street lamp outside casting weird shadows across the room. The figures stood around me, their blank masks staring, lifeless yet somehow watching. One stepped closer, reaching out, and I realized they were searching me, their cold fingers digging through my pockets, taking my wallet, phone, and keys. I tried to scream, to call for help, but my voice died in my throat, choked by fear. It felt like a nightmare where you can't move, can't speak, can't escape. They didn't hurt me, didn't say a word, just took what they wanted and left me there, trembling on the floor. The door creaked as it closed behind them, their footsteps fading into the night, and then silence. I don't know how long I stayed there, curled up in the dark, my mind replaying the moment over and over, trying to make sense of it. It felt like hours before I found the strength to stand, my legs shaking as I stumbled to the door. I pushed it open, the cool night air hitting my face, and ran to my car, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life, and I sped away, those twisting streets blurring as I tried to find my way out. When I finally hit the main road, I didn't stop, didn't look back, my hands still shaking on the wheel. I never told the police. How could I explain something so unreal? But those blank masks, those silent, cold figures, they haunt me. Every time I close my eyes, I see them, waiting in the shadows, their featureless faces staring. The next day, I quit my delivery job, but the fear didn't leave. It's still there, a constant reminder that some places, some streets, should be left alone, and sometimes the darkness hides things we can't even imagine. Working the night shift at the hospital was always creepy, but nothing prepared me for the night that changed how I saw the place forever. As an orderly, I was used to the quiet halls, the endless white walls, and the soft hum of fluorescent lights that flickered just enough to make you uneasy. After midnight, the hospital felt like a different world, with only the distant beeps of machines and the occasional footsteps of a nurse breaking the silence. Most nights, I hid out in the basement office, a small, dim room next to the morgue, where I'd kill time chatting with another orderly, counting the minutes until my shift ended. The morgue was the last place I wanted to think about, its cold, sterile presence always lurking in the back of my mind. That night, around 1 a.m., the air was thick with the sharp smell of disinfectant, and the overhead light buzzed like it was on its last legs. My coworker, Jake, and I were trading dumb stories to stay awake when we heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy ones, not the quick steps of a doctor or nurse. We both froze, glancing at the open door, and saw a man walk by. He was pale, almost sickly, with wide, bloodshot eyes that darted toward us for a second before he kept going. Something about his stare sent a shiver down my spine, like he didn't belong in the clean, modern hospital. A few minutes later, he came back, stopping right in the doorway, his outdated clothes hanging loose on his thin frame, like something from an old movie. His eyes locked on us, unblinking, and his voice was low and raspy when he spoke. "Can you let me into the morgue?" he asked, his words sharp and unsettling. Jake and I exchanged a look, thinking maybe he was picking up a body for a funeral home, but it was way too late for that. I nodded cautiously, asking what he needed, expecting him to give a name or some paperwork, but instead, he said something that made my stomach twist. "I'll pay you to let me in. Just for an hour. I need to be alone with the bodies." The words hit like a punch, hanging in the air like a bad smell. My heart started racing, and Jake's face went pale. Who says something like that? The guy's eyes were desperate, almost hungry, and the way he stood there, hands twitching, made my skin crawl. I forced my voice to stay steady and told him we couldn't do that. It was against hospital rules. His face darkened, his jaw clenching so hard I thought his teeth might crack, and for a moment I was sure he'd push past us. But then he just stared, his gaze drilling into us, before turning and walking away, his footsteps echoing down the empty hall. Jake and I sat there, stunned, the silence heavier than before. My pulse was pounding, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just dodged something awful. "We need to tell security," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, and we hurried upstairs to the security office, the hospital's empty halls feeling darker, the shadows stretching like they were alive. When we got there, we spilled everything to the guard on duty, describing the man's pale face, his weird clothes, and that creepy request. The guard's face changed, his eyes narrowing. "Did he ask to be alone with the bodies?" he said, his voice tight. I nodded, my stomach sinking. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "That guy's been here before, a few times over the last couple of months. Always sneaks off before we can grab him." My mind spun. He'd done this before? What did he want with the bodies? The guard promised to increase patrols, but that didn't make me feel any better. The idea of that guy creeping around the hospital, maybe watching us from the shadows, made my blood run cold. We went back to the basement office, but the rest of the shift felt wrong. Every sound, the hum of the air conditioning, a distant door closing, made me jump. I kept picturing his face, those wide, desperate eyes, and the way he'd asked to be alone with the dead. It was like he wasn't just curious, he needed it, like it was the only thing that mattered. When my shift finally ended, I practically ran to my car, the hospital's looming shape behind me feeling like it was watching. I never saw the man again, but the memory of that night stuck with me, a shadow that wouldn't leave. Every time I passed the morgue, I'd feel that same chill, like something dark was waiting just out of sight. The hospital, once just a boring job, became a place I couldn't trust, where the quiet hid secrets too twisted to think about. Even now, years later, I can't shake the image of that man, his raspy voice echoing in my head, asking for something no one should ever want. What was he after? What kind of person sneaks into a hospital at night, begging to be left alone with the dead? I don't know, and I hope I never find out, but the fear of how close we came to letting him slip through stays with me, a reminder that some things are better left locked away. When I was 13, my dad took me hunting in the Pine Barrens, a dense, shadowy forest that felt like it hid secrets in every tree, and what happened that night made me swear I'd never go back. It was late 2019, and we'd been to the Barrens before, but this time the air felt heavier, the trees closer, like they were closing in on us. The smell of damp leaves and pine needles filled my lungs as we arrived just before sunset, setting up near the forest's edge. Dad always said night was the best time to hunt because animals were more active, and I trusted him, clutching the small rifle he'd given me for my birthday. I wasn't scared at first. I'd hunted with him plenty of times, but as the sun sank and darkness swallowed the trees, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. The moonlight barely broke through the thick canopy, leaving only our flashlights to cut through the black. We walked deeper into the woods, our boots crunching softly on the leaves, the silence so thick it pressed against my ears. Dad would stop now and then, crouching to check the ground for tracks, but that night there was nothing, no rustling, no snapping twigs, just an eerie stillness that made my skin prickle. After an hour, my legs were aching, and I was ready to call it quits. Dad noticed and suggested we rest in a small clearing, sitting on a fallen log. The forest was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat, and I tried to focus on Dad's low voice as he talked about waiting for the right moment. But my eyes kept darting to the shadows, feeling like something was watching us. Then we heard it. A low, deep growl, not like any animal I'd ever heard, more like something angry and unnatural. My heart jumped, and I looked at Dad, whose face had gone pale. He grabbed his rifle, motioning for me to do the same, his eyes scanning the trees. The growl came again, closer, echoing through the forest like a warning. I gripped my rifle, my hand shaking, as Dad stood slowly, his breath quick and shallow. Then, from the shadows, a figure appeared, tall, way taller than any animal should be, hunched over with glowing yellow eyes that locked onto us. It looked like a wolf but massive, its body wrong, almost human in shape, like it didn't belong in this world. Its breath steamed in the cold air, sharp teeth glinting in our flashlight beams, and the growl turned into a snarl that made my blood freeze. Dad whispered to stay still, but my legs felt like jelly, fear rooting me to the spot. The creature circled us, moving through the trees, disappearing into the dark, only to reappear closer, its eyes never leaving us. I could barely breathe, my chest tight as it let out a bone-chilling howl that shook the air, loud enough to rattle my bones. Dad grabbed my arm, yanking me to my feet, and we ran, the forest blurring around us as branches scratched my face and arms. The creature's growls followed, echoing like it was right behind us, its presence heavy in the dark. We sprinted deeper into the woods, not caring where we were going, just desperate to get away. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I kept running, Dad's heavy breaths beside me. The trees seemed to twist, the paths disappearing, and I realized we were lost, the familiar trails gone in the chaos. The growling stopped, but the silence was worse, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a mistake. We ran for what felt like hours, my flashlight flickering, the beam growing weaker, the thought of being stuck in total darkness making my heart race faster. Finally, We stopped to catch our breath, Dad leaning against a tree, his face sweaty and pale. "We need to keep moving," he whispered, but I could hear the fear in his voice. We wandered, jumping at every sound, a snapping twig, a rustling leaf, each one feeling like the creature was back. My flashlight died, leaving us with just Dad's, and the darkness felt alive, pressing in from all sides. I kept seeing those glowing eyes in my mind, imagining them watching from the shadows. Just when I thought we'd never escape, we stumbled onto a narrow, overgrown path I recognized from earlier. Relief flooded through me as we followed it. Our steps hurried until we reached the truck. I climbed into the passenger seat, my hands still shaking, and Dad started the engine, the headlights cutting through the dark as we sped away. The pine barrens faded behind us, but neither of us spoke the whole drive home. What we'd seen wasn't just an animal, it was something else, something that didn't fit in the world I knew. When we got home, I collapsed into bed, but sleep didn't come easy. Those glowing eyes haunted me, and the forest's silence echoed in my head. We never talked about that night again, like saying it out loud would make it real. I don't know what that creature was, but it wasn't just a wolf or a bear. It was something older, something wrong. The pine barrens are vast, hiding things we're not meant to find, and I'll never set foot there again. Even now, years later, I feel it watching me in my dreams, waiting in the dark. Its howl a reminder that some places hold secrets too dangerous to uncover. Working the night shift at a lonely gas station on the edge of town was usually boring, but one night turned into a nightmare I'll never forget. I'd been at the job for about a year, sitting behind the counter, ringing up the occasional customer, and watching the clock crawl toward morning. The station was far enough from the city that it felt cut off, surrounded by dark fields and a quiet that could swallow you whole. That night, around 2:30 a.m., I was counting the cash in the register, making sure everything added up before my shift ended. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air conditioner hummed softly, the only sounds in the empty store. Outside, the parking lot was lit by harsh yellow lights, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. My manager always warned me to be careful at night, saying you never know who might walk through the door, but I'd never had trouble before, so I brushed it off. That was my mistake. I was stacking bills when the front door slammed open with a bang so loud I jumped, nearly dropping the cash. A man stormed in, his clothes dirty and torn, his eyes wild like he hadn't slept in days. He smelled like sweat and something sour, and before I could say a word, his gaze locked onto the money in my hands. Time slowed down, my body frozen as he lunged across the counter, snatching the cash with a quick, desperate grab. The bills slipped from my fingers, and he was already halfway to the door before I could react. Something snapped in me. Maybe it was adrenaline, maybe stupidity, but I wasn't about to let him get away. I bolted from behind the counter, yelling for him to stop, my heart pounding as I chased him into the parking lot. He stumbled, his movements sloppy, like he was high or drunk, the cash peeking out of his jacket pocket as he ran. I could tell he wasn't fast, his body swaying with every step, and I closed the gap, shouting again, my voice echoing in the empty lot. He glanced back, panic in his eyes, and tried to speed up, but he tripped, nearly falling. Without thinking, I grabbed his arm, my fingers digging into his jacket. He thrashed, trying to shake me off, his breath ragged, and for a moment, we wrestled, his wild eyes meeting mine. He broke free, stumbling forward, but I wasn't giving up. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, trying to keep my voice steady as I told the operator what was happening, describing the man and the gas station's location. They said police were on the way, and I kept following him, staying a safe distance now, watching him weave through the lot. He didn't seem to notice me anymore, too focused on getting away, his steps slowing as he gasped for air. I could hear the faint wail of sirens in the distance, and he heard them too, freezing in place, his shoulders tensing. The police cars screeched into the lot, lights flashing red and blue, and two officers jumped out, guns drawn, shouting for him to get on the ground. He hesitated, his eyes darting like a trapped animal, but he knew it was over. Slowly, he dropped to his knees, hands behind his head, and the officers moved in, cuffing him and pulling him up. One of them came over to me, asking for details, and I explained everything, my voice shaky as the adrenaline faded. They searched him, finding the cash stuffed in his jacket, and told me he was likely homeless, probably on drugs, desperate for anything he could get. They thanked me for calling, but warned that chasing him wasn't smart. It could have been dangerous. I nodded, still rattled, watching as they led him to the squad car, his head hanging low, his face a mix of defeat and shame. Back inside the gas station, the place felt different, like the safety I'd taken for granted was gone. I sat behind the counter, staring at the door, half expecting someone else to burst in. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and the clock seemed stuck, the minutes dragging as I tried to calm down. The rest of the shift was quiet, but the silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was heavy, like it was hiding something. When my shift finally ended, I locked up and walked to my car, the dark parking lot feeling bigger, the shadows deeper. Driving home, I kept thinking about the man, how life had pushed him to this point, stealing from a gas station in the middle of the night. I felt a pang of pity, but more than that, I felt fear. Fear of how close I'd come to something worse. What if he'd had a weapon? What if he'd fought back harder? The police said I'd done the right thing by calling, but running after him was reckless, and I knew they were right. That night changed the job for me. The gas station, once just a boring place to pass the time, became a reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. Even now, I can't drive by a gas station at night without feeling that same chill, picturing those wild eyes and the way the shadows seemed to watch. It was just a robbery, but it felt like something darker, like I'd brushed against a world I wasn't meant to see, and I'm thankful I walked away with nothing but a story to tell. The camping trip was supposed to be a fun escape from the stress of college, but it turned into a nightmare that made me question what's real and what's not. It was me, Devin, Bethany, and Seth. For friends excited to spend a weekend in the woods, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories under the stars. We piled into Devin's car, laughing and blasting our favorite songs, the road stretching out dark and winding through a thick forest. The trees loomed close, their branches like twisted fingers scraping the sky, and the moonlight barely broke through, casting weird shadows on the pavement. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my gut, chalking it up to excitement, but something about the night felt off, like the forest was watching us. We were deep into the drive, the music loud, when a sharp curve came out of nowhere. Devin swerved, but the road was slick, and the tires screeched as the car skidded, spinning off the pavement and crashing into a tree with a sickening crunch. I heard Bethany scream, then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was standing outside the car, the wrecked vehicle steaming against a tree, its front smashed in. My head felt fuzzy, like I was underwater, and I saw Devin, Bethany, and Seth standing beside me, their faces pale. I asked if everyone was okay, my voice sounding flat, and Bethany nodded slowly, but she wouldn't look at me. Seth just stared at the car, his eyes wide. I followed his gaze, and my heart stopped. Inside the car, still strapped into our seats, were our bodies. Mine slumped in the passenger seat, blood trickling down my forehead, Devin gripping the wheel, his face twisted in pain. Bethany and Seth in the back, their heads lolling. I blinked, my mind refusing to process it, but the image stayed, vivid and real. "We're outside the car," Bethany whispered, her voice shaking. "But we're still in there." My chest tightened, panic rising as I reached for the car door, only for my hand to pass right through it, like I was a ghost. Seth's voice cracked as he asked, "Are we dead?" I didn't want to answer, couldn't, the thought too terrifying to face. The forest around us grew darker, the trees seeming to lean closer, the air thick with a heavy, unnatural weight. It felt like something was watching us, lurking just beyond the shadows. I tried to move, to walk away from the wreck, but my feet felt stuck, like the ground was pulling me back. "We have to get out of here," I said, trying to sound brave, but my voice broke. Where could we go? We were miles from anywhere, lost in the woods with no phones, no map, just the crashed car and our lifeless bodies inside. Time blurred, the night stretching endlessly, every rustle in the trees making my heart race. The forest felt alive, its whispers mocking us, like it knew we didn't belong. I kept looking at my body in the car, the blood on my face, and wondered if this was a dream or something worse. The shadows seemed to move, forming shapes that weren't quite right, and the air grew colder, pressing against my chest. I felt dizzy, like I was falling into a deep, dark void, my vision blurring as Bethany's quiet sobs and Seth's terrified face faded. Everything went black again, and I thought that was it. We were gone. Then I woke up, the harsh lights of a hospital room burning my eyes, the steady beep of machines filling my ears. I was in a bed, bandages on my head, my body aching but alive. Devin was in the bed next to me, his eyes half open, and Bethany and Seth were there too, hooked up to monitors, their faces bruised but breathing. A nurse came in, checking our charts with a warm smile. "You all had a bad crash," she said, "but you're going to be okay. You were out for a couple of days." I could barely process her words, my mind still stuck in the forest, standing outside that wrecked car. I looked at Bethany, her eyes wide with the same fear I felt, and Seth, pale but relieved. We were alive, but what we'd experienced felt too real to be a dream. Had we shared some kind of nightmare, a hallucination from the crash? Or had we really been outside our bodies, trapped in that dark forest? The memory of the trees closing in, the shadows whispering, felt so vivid I couldn't shake it. The nurse kept talking, but I barely heard her, my mind replaying the crash, the sight of our bodies, the suffocating darkness. When I finally spoke, my voice was a whisper. We made it. But even as I said it, a chill ran through me. It didn't feel like just a dream, not completely. The forest had felt alive, like it wanted to keep us, and I couldn't shake the thought that we'd escaped something we weren't meant to. As we recovered, none of us talked about it, like saying it out loud would make it real again. But I saw it in their eyes. Bethany's quiet stares, Seth's nervous glances, Devin's clenched jaw. We were back in the real world, but a piece of that night stayed with us, a shadow that lingered in the corners of my mind. I don't drive through forests at night anymore, and I avoid roads that feel too quiet, too dark. The crash was bad, but what scared me most was the feeling that something in those woods saw us, something that didn't want us to leave, and I'm not sure we fully escaped it. It was one of those brutally hot nights where the air felt like a heavy blanket, and as a pizza delivery driver, all I wanted was to finish my last drop-off and crash at home. But that night turned into something I'll never shake. My shirt was soaked with sweat, my legs ached from hours on the road, and I desperately needed a bathroom break after chugging water to survive the heat wave. The final order took me to a dark, run-down house on a quiet street, the kind that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The paint was peeling, the windows caked with grime, and the lawn was a tangle of weeds taller than my knees. No lights were on, inside or out, making the place feel like it was abandoned, swallowed by the night. I parked, grabbed the pizza box, and stepped out, the silence hitting me hard. No crickets, no breeze, just a heavy stillness that made my skin prickle. I walked up to the porch, the gravel crunching under my shoes, and rang the doorbell, but no one answered. I rang again, waiting, sweat dripping down my neck, the heat pressing against me like a weight. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone and called the number on the order, and after a few rings, a woman answered, her voice shaky and out of breath. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm on my way. Just wait a few minutes." Something about her tone felt off, like she was scared or hiding something, but I agreed to wait, trying to ignore the growing unease in my gut. The need to pee was unbearable now, and with no one around, I spotted a large bush by the house, thick enough to hide me in the dark. I glanced around, made sure the street was empty, and stepped over to relieve myself, the relief washing over me as I finally let go. Then I heard it, a rustle in the bush, right in front of me. My heart stopped, and I stumbled back, zipping up in a panic, as a figure burst out from the leaves. It was a man, crouched low, his face hidden in the shadows, and before I could say anything, he bolted, sprinting into the darkness like his life depended on it. I stood frozen, my pulse racing, my mind trying to process what just happened. I just peed on a guy hiding in the bushes. Shaking, I looked down and saw something glinting in the dim light, a small, worn backpack half buried in the leaves. I reached for it, my hands trembling, and opened it, my stomach dropping as I saw what was inside. A roll of duct tape, a serrated knife, and a coil of rope. This wasn't just some random bag. It was a kit for something awful, something planned. My breath caught, and I realized this guy wasn't just a creep, he was dangerous. I fumbled for my phone and called 911, my voice shaking as I told the operator about the man, the bag, and the house, trying to stay calm while my heart pounded. They said police were coming, but the wait felt like forever, my eyes scanning the dark street for any sign of him returning. I paced the yard, the pizza box forgotten on the ground, every shadow making me jump, expecting him to lunge out again. Then I saw her, the woman from the phone call, hurrying down the street, glancing over her shoulder like she was being chased. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, and when she saw me, she ran toward me, her voice breaking. "Please, help me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It's my ex. He's dangerous. He's after me." My blood ran cold as I realized the man in the bushes was probably him, waiting for her with that bag of tools. I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward my car. "Get in," I said, locking the doors as we slid inside, my eyes darting to the shadows. "We'll wait for the police." She nodded, sobbing, her hands shaking as she clutched her purse. The minutes dragged, the silence between us heavy, broken only by her quiet cries. Finally, police cars pulled up, their lights flashing, and officers swarmed the area. I waved them over, explaining everything: the man, the bag, the woman's fear, handing over the backpack as evidence. They searched the area, but the man was gone, vanished into the night. The woman gave her statement, her voice trembling as she described her ex, a man with a history of violence who'd been stalking her. The officers reassured her they'd do everything to find him, and they took her to a safe place. I watched her go, her face a mix of relief and terror, and drove home, the image of that bag burning in my mind. The knife, the rope, the duct tape, it was all too real, too close. I couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened if I hadn't needed to pee, if I hadn't interrupted him. Was it luck or something else? The heat still pressed down as I drove, but it was the cold fear that stayed with me, creeping up my spine. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment, the rustle in the bush, the man's shadow sprinting away, the woman's terrified eyes. I quit delivering pizzas soon after, unable to face dark streets without seeing him lurking, waiting. That house, that moment, changed me. I'd been in the right place at the right time, but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like I'd brushed against something evil, something that could have ended so much worse. Even now, when I pass a quiet house or an overgrown yard, I feel that same chill, a reminder that danger can hide in the most ordinary places, waiting for its chance. A few years ago, my best friend Kevin and I decided to explore an old, abandoned house on the edge of our town, thinking it would be a fun adventure, but what we found inside made me believe some places are better left alone. The house sat on a hill, far from any other buildings, its cracked walls and broken windows covered in vines, like nature was trying to swallow it whole. Everyone in town said it was haunted, but we were young and cocky, laughing off the stories as we planned our trip for a boring weekend. Kevin, always the fearless one, was pumped, saying it'd be cool to check out the creepy place. But as we walked up the hill, the air felt heavy, colder than it should have been, and a knot of dread tightened in my chest. The house looked ancient, its roof caved in places, the front door hanging off its hinges, creaking in the breeze. I wanted to turn back, but Kevin was already pushing through the gate, his grin daring me to follow. Inside, the air smelled of dust and rot, the floor littered with dirt and broken furniture, the silence so thick it pressed against my ears. Kevin wandered ahead, poking at old chairs and peeling wallpaper, acting like it was all a game, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. My heart pounded as we moved through the dark rooms, my eyes darting to every shadow, expecting something to jump out. The deeper we went, the worse it got, like the house was watching us, its walls groaning softly, as if annoyed we were there. Kevin suggested checking upstairs, and I hesitated, my voice shaky as I said we should stick to the ground floor, but he was already climbing the rickety staircase, the wood creaking under his weight. I followed, gripping the wobbly railing, my stomach churning with every step. The second floor was even darker, the windows boarded up or too dirty to let in light, and a foul smell hit us, like something had died and been left to rot. The air was colder up here, unnaturally so, and I felt eyes on me, though I couldn't see anyone. We moved down a narrow hallway, the floorboards groaning, and I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see something in the shadows. Kevin, still acting tough, stopped at a door at the end of the hall where a low, deep growl echoed, freezing us both in place. It wasn't an animal, it was something darker, more sinister, like a warning from something that didn't want us there. My blood ran cold, and I whispered to Kevin that we needed to leave, but he shook his head, saying it was probably just the wind, though his voice cracked with doubt. He pushed the door open slowly, and what we saw inside made my heart stop. In the corner of the dark room, a shadow moved, a figure, hunched over, not quite human, its eyes glowing faintly like embers in the blackness. The growling stopped, and the silence was worse, heavy and suffocating. Then the figure spoke, its voice low and raspy, like it came from somewhere deep and wrong. "Leave, or never leave again." The words hit like a curse, chilling me to the bone. Kevin and I didn't wait. We turned and bolted, the house coming alive around us, walls creaking, floorboards shaking, like it was chasing us out. We stumbled down the stairs, nearly tripping, the air thick as if it wanted to hold us back. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst, my legs burning as we sprinted through the dark rooms, the shadows seeming to twist and follow. We burst through the front door, the gate banging behind us as we ran into the empty field outside, not stopping until we were far from the house. Gasping for air, we collapsed, the hill looming in the distance, the house silent and still, like nothing had happened. We didn't speak, just stared at it, the memory of that figure's glowing eyes and threatening voice burning in my mind. We never talked about that day again, like saying it out loud would summon whatever was in there. I couldn't shake the feeling we'd escaped something evil, something that wanted us to stay forever. The house still stands on that hill, untouched, and I avoid it, even driving past. Those words, "leave or never leave again," echo in my head, a warning I'll never forget. Whatever lived in that house wasn't human, and we were lucky to get out, but I can't help wondering if others have wandered in and weren't as fortunate. It started with a simple message on my phone, a link to a storytelling app promising true horror stories that'll keep you up at night, and since I'd always loved a good scare, I clicked without thinking, not knowing it would pull me into a nightmare I couldn't escape. The app was called Whispers in the Dark, and it had a sleek black interface with a single button, "Listen Now." I was alone in my apartment, the city outside quiet in the early hours, the only sound the hum of my fridge. I hit play, and a deep, gravelly voice began telling a story about a man lost in a forest, hunted by something with glowing eyes. The voice was hypnotic, pulling me in, each word dripping with dread, and I felt a chill despite the warm room. The story ended abruptly, and a prompt appeared, "Share this tale to unlock the next." I hesitated, but my curiosity won, and I sent the link to a group chat with my friends, figuring they'd get a kick out of it. Within minutes, they were hooked too, texting about how creepy it was, and I unlocked the next story, a tale of a delivery driver cornered by masked figures in an abandoned house. Each story was more unsettling than the last, and the app always demanded I share it to keep going. I sent it to more friends, co-workers, even posted it online, and soon, people I barely knew were messaging me about the app, their voices tinged with excitement and fear. But something felt off. The stories were too vivid, too real, like the narrator knew things no one should. One night, after sharing the app with a dozen more people, I got a new message, "You've shared enough. Meet the storyteller." My heart skipped, the words glowing on my screen, and a location pin appeared, a rundown community center on the edge of town. I should have ignored it, deleted the app, but the stories had burrowed into my mind, and I needed to know who was behind them. I drove out late, the streets empty, the center's windows dark and cracked, its parking lot deserted except for a single flickering street lamp. Inside, the air was stale, smelling of mold and old wood, and the faint sound of static led me to a small auditorium. A figure sat on the stage, cloaked in shadows, their face hidden under a hood. The same gravelly voice from the app spoke, welcoming me by name, sending a shiver down my spine. "You've spread my stories well," they said, their words slow and deliberate. "Now, you'll live one." Before I could react, the room went dark, the static growing louder, filling my head like a scream. When the lights flickered back, I wasn't in the auditorium anymore. I was in a forest, the trees towering and twisted, just like the first story. My phone was gone, my car nowhere in sight, and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth. I heard a growl, low and guttural, and saw glowing eyes in the distance, moving closer. Panic surged, and I ran, branches tearing at my clothes, the ground uneven under my feet. The growls followed, joined by whispers like the voices from the app stories, mocking me, urging me to keep going. I stumbled into a clearing, only to find myself outside an abandoned house, its windows broken, vines choking the walls, the setting of another story. The door creaked open, and I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, like the masked figures from the delivery tale. My heart pounded as I bolted inside, hoping to hide, but the house seemed alive, the walls groaning, the shadows shifting into shapes that weren't human. I ran upstairs, the air growing colder, a foul smell like rot hitting my nose, and in a dark room, I saw a figure, hunched, eyes glowing faintly, just like the creature Kevin faced in that haunted house. "Leave or never leave again," it hissed, its voice the same as the storyteller's. I turned to run, but the hallway stretched endlessly, doors slamming shut around me. The whispers grew louder, chanting my name, recounting every story I'd shared, each one feeling like it was happening to me. I saw the gas station from another tale, the man with wild eyes lunging at me, then the hospital morgue, a pale figure asking to be let in, then the crashed car, my own body slumped inside. My mind spun, unable to tell what was real, the stories blending into a nightmare I couldn't escape. I kept running, through forests, houses, dark streets, each scene a piece of the app's tales, the storyteller's voice always in my head, laughing, urging me to share more. My legs burned, my breath ragged, but I couldn't stop. The glowing eyes, the masked figures, the sinister shapes were always behind me. Finally, I tripped, falling into darkness, and when I opened my eyes, I was back in my apartment, my phone buzzing with a new message: keep sharing, or live the stories forever. My hands shook as I deleted the app, but the whispers didn't stop, echoing in my head at night, the storyteller's voice telling me I'd never be free. My friends stopped replying, their messages replaced by eerie silence, and I found posts online from others who'd met the storyteller, their stories cut off mid-sentence. I don't know who or what the storyteller was, some urban legend, a ghost, or something worse, but those stories weren't just tales. They were traps, pulling us in, making us spread them like a curse. I've moved, changed my number, avoided dark places, but I still hear the whispers, see the glowing eyes in my dreams, feel the cold air of that abandoned house. The app is gone, but its stories live in me, and every time I pass a quiet street or an old building, I wonder if the storyteller is still out there, waiting for someone new to share their tales, to step into their nightmare. I want to warn everyone, don't click unknown links, don't share strange apps, but I'm too scared, afraid that speaking it aloud will bring the storyteller back, their voice ready to pull me into another story I might not survive.